running. All right, so some people have already gotten started on PA5, which is great because I'm serious when I say it can take a long time to do this assignment, and there seems to be a competition going on for who can make the shortest version of PA5. So, and people have blown past my personal records, so that's awesome. All right, let's see. So we went through the basics of PA5 yesterday, and then in digging into the how-to of all of this, we got as far as associative arrays. And so we introduced the idea of this as an array. Let's say it's called, data. But instead of indexing this array with consecutive integers starting from 0, we can index this array with, whatever we want, including strings. And this is really useful for PA5 because what we're trying to do in PA5, after we've done all of the parsing and we figured out, this is a phrase, we want to record how many times we've seen this phrase. So we need to keep a list of phrases we've seen, and each phrase that we get, we need to know, have we seen this before? If not, we need to remember it with a count of 1. But if we've seen that phrase before, we need to increment its count from however many times we saw it to that number plus 1. So we need a efficient way to be able to take a phrase and access an integer from it, right? And this is a perfect setup for an associative array. So we can basically, if we wanted, we could make an array called tally. And if phrase is a bash variable that contains, the phrase we just found, we can use this to access the number of times we've seen that phrase. And if this doesn't access anything, then it's a new phrase. We can set this equal to 1. Otherwise, we can set it equal to itself plus 1. So I want to go through some of the mechanics of doing associative arrays in bash, and then start putting together some sample code. So let's look at arrays in bash. So you can make a plain old array by saying, declare data. You got to spell it right though. All right. This makes data an array type variable, and I can say something like data bracket 0 equals hello, data bracket 2 equals cool. So I'm storing some values in my data variable. If I echo $data, it shows me data bracket 0. But I can say echo $curly bracket data bracket 2, and it shows me element 2. If I echo $curly bracket data bracket 5, it shows me element 5. And if I look for an element that I haven't defined anything in, it's just an empty string. So that's a plain old array. That's like an array of strings maybe in C.
Question for you.
Mm-hmm.
How do you print the entirety of it?
So you could do something like index equals 0.
You can print star.
I always forget to increment my variable. So you can do it like a plain old for loop. in C. And just loop through. And we don't necessarily know how many things are stored in here, which is a problem we have in C also.
You can also, if it's indexed, you can just print or echo $, curly bracket, array name, star, curly bracket.
Like that?
Yeah.
Cool. So what we're going to play with is a different kind of array, right? We're going to do this associative array. So let me start a new bash shell here. And to make an associative array, I'm going to say declare, but I'm going to put a switch -a in the name of my array. It doesn't have to be called data, it's just a variable name. So I'll declare an associative array called data. And I can do these same things that I did before. So I can say data bracket 0 equals hello. But now I can also do things like make data bracket data bracket Nick equals Macias. And I can do data bracket Izad equals his last name, and so on. And data is still just an array, right? But I have these different indices that I can use to pull values out of it. So if I echo $ curly bracket data bracket 0, it shows me hello. If I do data bracket Nick, it shows me the contents of that element. If I do Izad, it shows me the contents of that element. If I do an index that doesn't exist, it still shows me a blank line. So different kind of beast. And, the things that I'm storing in here could be something like a phrase. And now if I look for the value of the sun is shining, I can see that I've seen that phrase 2 times. And if I look for the phrase, the sun is not shining, I'd see that I've never seen that phrase before. So I could do something like, count equals this, and then just do our favorite count equals count plus 1. And I could say data bracket the sun is shining equals $count. And now if I look at how many times I've seen this phrase, I've seen it 3 times now. So there's the guts of part 2 of PA5, right? Make an associative array. And by default, if you access an element that hasn't been given a value, it's an empty string. And if I set my count equal to, an empty string, if I try to use that in arithmetic by, say, setting it equal to itself plus 1, it gets treated as a 0. And so, something I've never seen before, now it's going to say, you've seen this thing 1 time. So make an associative array. When you get a phrase, which is in the middle of that big loop that you're doing, when you get a phrase, use that to look up your tally, right? I'm calling it data here just because I wasn't being imaginative, but maybe call it tally or something. Look that up, get the count, add 1, store it back in there. And when you're done with all of this, you will have all of your phrases stored in this array. And so one of the nice things about associative arrays, hash tables, is they're really fast for searching. If we were doing this, with just a pair of arrays, one that stored phrases and one that stored counts, every time we got a new phrase, we'd have to search through the array of phrases to see if we've got this phrase already. And then if we do, we find the corresponding count and increment it. We don't have to do that, and in fact, we don't want to do that. That will really slow down your program. That's what we call an order n squared. If you have 100 times more phrases, it's going to take you 10,000 times as long to run your code. So with an associative array, you can search more or less in a fixed amount of time, no matter how much stuff you have in your array. So you get a phrase, look it up in your tally array to get the current number of times you've seen it, increment it, and then store it back. Alright, and then there's one more part to the assignment, which is displaying the phrases and the counts. So going through at the end, after you've read your whole file, you want to go through and display the contents of your tally array. And so there's some peculiar index for doing this. So if I echo $, let's come back over here. So if I echo $, curly bracket, exclamation mark data bracket @, I get a list of keys, right? These are a list of indices, things that I can use to access data in my array. So I have an element called EZOD, an element indexed by Nick, an element indexed by 0, and an element indexed by the sun is shining. And we can use that for in structure on this list also. So we can say for index in this this thing. We can say do. And we can just, let's loop through here and let's list out the indices one by one. So for index in, this funny thing, this basically says go through the list of keys or indices in this associative array. Do echo next index is this thing done. There's my indices. So the problem with this is, right, when I look at my index for the sun is shining, right, it's 4 words separated by spaces. Right, and I don't actually have an index called the or sun or is or shining. So when you're doing this in PA5, leave those underscores in your phrases. Right, we're changing our spaces to underscores so that we can space separate our phrases so we can pull them out, in our part 1 for loop. If you leave those underscores in there when you record your tallies, then this would look like the following. So let's make a tally. All right, so we've got some data in our associative array, right? And after we do our massaging in part 1, we've got underscores instead of spaces. We got everything in uppercase. We got no punctuation and so on and so forth. So now if I do my for in loop here, right? I iterate once for each phrase in my index, and there's my 4 indices. Those are my 4 phrases that I've seen and that I've presumably saved values for. And if I want to see how many times I've seen $index, it's just going to be $tally, sorry, $curly bracket, tally bracket $index. And there's part 3 of PA5. Right, so what's happening here? This thing is giving me a space-separated list of keys or indices. And so the for in basically says iterate on this loop, and each time through set index equal to the next thing that you got back from this, which for us is going to be the next phrase. It's going to be zod, and then this, and then this, and then this. And inside that loop, you can do anything that you want, but what we're doing here is we're printing out that index itself, which is the phrase, and then I'm using that $index. I'm using that $index to access my associative array and print out its value. So $curly array name bracket the index, and I'm just using $index, so it'll be each of these phrases in turn. Let's see, is there any difference between this and a plain old dictionary? I don't know what a plain old dictionary is. But if by a plain old dictionary you mean like a pair of arrays that store, you know, say phrases and something associated with them, this is different because it's a fast recall. It's a fast search. All right, so questions about this? This is pretty much all you need for PA5. What we went through yesterday, what we've gone through today. Okay, so I don't know what they are in Python, but I'm gonna guess that yeah, they're probably exactly the same. Most languages have some way to do something like this. In C, you can do it with a library called DBM, Database Manager. There's hash maps in Java, and I'm guessing dictionaries in Python. And again, this is super fast, right? I could put a million things into my array, and when I try to access, you know, an array with an index like this, the system internally is not going to check each of the million elements to see if the index is this. There's a way to actually go from this phrase to more or less directly where that associated value would be stored in memory. We'll take this apart in 222 in winter, and actually implement this ourselves in C. So you want to keep messing with sed, right, and tr, and you know, working on the command line, massaging your input, figuring out how to take your input and turn it into nice clean phrases with underscores instead of spaces, and then do that for in to pull out your phrases, and then do all of this stuff to do the tallying. So if we look at the end of the homework 5 write-up, there's some examples of all of this. So down here at the end, there's the following sample code may be helpful in practicing with and learning how to use associative arrays. So, you know, here we're declaring an array. I'm calling it hash in this example. If you want to store values, it just looks like this. Right, so variable name bracket index equals value. And then if you want to pull out a value, it's $curly bracket variable name bracket index. All right, And then if you want to go through all of the keys, because we don't know ahead of time what phrases you have, so I can't just start printing out, you know, elements in the array unless I know what the indices are. So you can find all the indices by doing a loop like this for key in $, curly, exclamation mark, variable name, bracket, @, do, and then inside here, this is going to be the next key. And you can do whatever you want with it. You can use it as an index to pull out the value, and then you're pretty much done. All right, Sam, you are here. So yes, if there's no other questions on this, I will pause the recording and turn off my screen share. And if you're ready to present, you can go ahead and do that. And let me see if there's an easy way for me to pause this. I don't have an easy way to do that, so here's what I'm going to do. Yeah, I'll just kill this.